You are sitting in my chair, and quite frankly, you are ruining the aesthetic of my party. Get out. Achal. The words cut through the soft ambient
I am so
music
sorry,
of
I
the
did not
Azure Cove
realize.
Resort's exclusive rooftop pavilion. Clara did not jump.
Derek,
She did not
look at the
flinch.
screen, it's already over.
She simply finished reading the paragraph on her tablet, marked a highlight with her stylus, and finally looked up. Standing over her was Derek Sterling, dressed in a custom-tailored burgundy suit that likely cost more than the average car. His gold watch gleamed under the afternoon sun as he crossed his arms. Flanked by two friends who were already snickering, Clara adjusted her glasses. She wore a simple white linen blouse, comfortable beige trousers, and flat leather loafers. There were no logos on her clothes, no heavy jewelry around her neck. To someone like Derek, she looked like a lost tourist who had wandered past the velvet rope. I'm currently reviewing a quarterly report, Clara replied, her voice steady and quiet. There are plenty of other chairs available. Derek let out a sharp, mocking laugh. He gestured to the sprawling oceanfront pavilion, which was currently being decorated with white roses and expensive champagne towers. This is a private corporate retreat for Sterling Tech. I am the executive vice president. Tomorrow, when my father retires, I become the CEO. I rented this entire floor for my inner circle. You do not belong here. He leaned in closer, his eyes scanning her plain canvas tote bag resting on the glass table. Let me guess. You sneaked up the service elevator to get a free drink, finish your water, and leave before I have you thrown out. Clara did not argue. She did not try to explain who she was. Instead, she picked up her glass of iced water, took a slow sip, and set it back down precisely on the coaster. I suggest you check the venue's master reservation before you make a scene, Clara murmured. Turning her attention back to her screen, Derek's face flushed with irritation. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially by someone he deemed beneath his notice. He snapped his fingers at a passing server. Get security up here, Derek ordered. Now. Clara merely tapped a button on her screen, sending an email she had drafted hours ago. Within 2 minutes, a resort security guard in a crisp navy uniform approached the table. He looked nervous, clearly aware of the Sterling family's reputation for leaving massive tips and throwing massive tantrums. Is there a problem here, Mr. Sterling? The guard asked, keeping a respectful distance. Derek pointed a manicured finger at Clara. Yes, this woman is trespassing. I booked this entire pavilion for my private pre-transition celebration. She refuses to leave. Escort her to the lobby. The guard turned to Clara, offering a polite but firm smile. Ma'am, I'm afraid this area is reserved for a private function. I'll have to ask you to pack up your things. Clara closed her tablet and rested her hands on the table. She didn't look angry or frightened. I understand you are doing your job. However, I am not trespassing. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Derek scoffed loudly, glancing back at his friends who were busy recording the encounter on their phones. She's delusional. Just grab her bag and show her the exit. Instead of raising her voice, Clara reached into her plain tote bag. She bypassed her wallet and pulled out a simple black key card, resting it flat on the glass table. It wasn't a standard room key. It had the gold foil crest of the Azure Cove's ownership suite, a card only issued to the primary leaseholder of the penthouse and pavilion. If you scan that, Claire instructed the guard softly, you will see the name of the person who currently holds the lease for this floor. Derek rolled his eyes. Oh, please. She probably found it in the hallway. Do your job and remove her. The guard pulled out his handheld scanner and hovered it over the black card. A green light flashed, and like a name popped up on his screen. His eyes widened, and he suddenly took a half step back, looking from the screen to Clara, his posture shifting from authoritative to deeply apologetic. I am so sorry for the interruption, the guard whispered. lowering his scanner. Derek narrowed his eyes, confused by the sudden change in the guard's tone. Something wasn't right, but his ego refused to let him see it. "What are you doing?" Derek demanded, stepping into the guard's space. "Why are you apologizing to her? I am Derek Sterling. I pay your salary for the weekend." Salary for... Before the guard could explain, the heavy glass doors of the elevator chimed. And Marcus, the resort's general manager, stepped out. He was carrying a leather-bound folio and looked visibly stressed. He hurried over to the group, dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus began, his voice tight. "There seems to be an issue with your account," Derek scoffed, turning his frustration toward the manager. "An issue I gave your front desk the Sterling Tech corporate black card this morning. It has an unlimited limit. Fix whatever glitch your antiquated system is having and bring out the caviar." Marcus cleared his throat, glancing nervously at Clara, who was watching the exchange with mild interest. "Sir, it isn't a glitch. The issuing bank has placed a hard freeze on your specific corporate card. Furthermore, the Central Accounting Office of Sterling Tech just sent us an email withdrawing authorization for any luxury expenses under your name." Derek's confident smirk vanished. The two friends behind him stopped laughing, suddenly checking their own phones. "That's impossible," Derek snapped. "My father is Arthur Sterling. I run the entertainment and networking division. No one in accounting has the authority to freeze my card." Clara leaned back in her chair. "Actually, they do." Derek spun around to face her, his patience entirely gone. "Keep your mouth shut. You don't know anything about my company. I know that corporate policy strictly prohibits using company funds for personal parties," Clara stated calmly, not breaking eye contact. "I also know that your card was frozen precisely 14 minutes ago." Derek stared at her, a cold prickle of unease finally piercing through his arrogance. How could this woman, sitting here in cheap shoes and a plain shirt, know the exact timing of his financial suspension? "Who are you?" Derek asked. Clara simply opened her tablet again. "I am the person who authorized the freeze." Silence fell over the table. The ocean breeze suddenly felt very loud. Derek stared at Clara, trying to match her plain face with the high-level executives he occasionally bothered to meet at his father's corporate headquarters. "You're lying," Derek declared, though his voice lacked its previous boom. "My father signs off on the expense accounts. The only other person who can touch those funds is the chief operating officer, and I know for a fact that position has been vacant for months." Clara pulled a manila folder from her tote bag. She opened it and slid a single sheet of heavy watermarked paper across the glass table toward him. "The position was filled privately 3 months ago," Clara explained. "Your father wanted the transition to be smooth behind the scenes before making a public announcement tomorrow." Derek reluctantly looked down at the paper. It was a formal corporate appointment document. At the bottom was the unmistakable, sweeping signature of his father, Arthur Sterling. Above it, the document named Clara Hayes as the new chief operating officer, granting her full executive oversight over all financial departments. "You're Clara," Derek murmured, his face losing its color. He had heard the name in passing. His father had mentioned bringing in a consultant to clean house, but Derek had assumed it was some old, retired executive. He never imagined it was a young, quiet woman who dressed like a librarian. "I am," Clara answered. "Even if you are the COO." Derek snarled, desperately trying to regain his footing. "That doesn't give you the right to cancel my reservation." "I am family. Tomorrow, my father is naming me CEO. You'll be working for me, so I highly suggest you unfreeze my card and vacate my pavilion." Clara didn't raise an eyebrow. She simply looked at Marcus, the manager. "Marcus," Clara called softly, "could you clarify the booking situation for Mr. Sterling?" Marcus nodded quickly. "Sir, the corporate card was declined. However, The pavilion was never booked under Sterling Tech anyway. It was booked and paid for in full, 3 weeks ago, by a private individual. Derek frowned, confused. Who? Clara picked up her black keycard. Me. With my own personal funds. Derek took a step back, shaking his head. You paid for this? This rooftop costs $50,000 a day. A COO makes a good salary, but nobody drops that kind of money on a weekend unless they own the company. I prefer quiet places to work, Clara replied simply. And I don't rely solely on a corporate salary. I built my own logistics firm 10 years ago before your father bought it. The money I spent today is mine, not your father's, not the company's. Derek's friends were now slowly backing away toward the elevator, wanting no part of this disaster. Derek, however, was trapped by his own pride. He had invited 50 wealthy influencers and business partners to this party. If they arrived and found he couldn't even pay for the drinks, his reputation would be ruined before he even took the CEO chair. Fine, Derek spat, pulling out his personal platinum credit card. You want to play hardball? I'll buy the reservation from you. Here, charge $60,000 to this card. Marcus, give her a $10,000 profit and get her out of my sight. Marcus looked at the card, then at Clara. He didn't move. Clara shook her head. The reservation is not for sale. Everyone has a price, Derek insisted, his voice rising in panic. $70,000, just take the money and leave. My guests are arriving in an hour. I don't want your money, Derek, Clara stated, her tone remaining completely even. I want to work in peace. I warned you that you were making a mistake when you first walked up to this table. You chose to insult me. You chose to assume that because I don't wear a designer label, I am someone you can step on. I am not. Derek slammed his hand on the glass table, making Clara's water glass rattle. You think you can embarrass me? I'll call my father right now. When he hears how you're treating his son, you won't just lose this table, you'll lose your job. Clara reached for her phone. Let's save you the trouble. Clara unlocked her phone, tapped a contact named Arthur, and hit the speaker button. She placed the phone on the table next to the succession document. The dial tone echoed in the quiet pavilion. Derek crossed his arms, wearing a triumphant sneer. Good. Let him hear it from you. Let's see how long you last. On the third ring, a deep, raspy voice answered. Clara, I assume you're at the resort. Is the paperwork finalized? Almost. Arthur, Clara replied. But we have a slight interruption. Derek is here in the pavilion. He is quite upset about his corporate card being frozen. There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. Derek leaned down toward the phone. Dad, this woman is completely out of control. She hijacked my venue, canceled my card, and is trying to ruin the pre-transition party. Tell her to pack up and leave before I have her escorted out by the police. Another long silence followed. Then, Arthur Sterling's voice came through the speaker, devoid of any warmth. Derek, the only person who is out of control is you. I told you 3 months ago to stop using the company as your personal piggy bank. You ignored me. You threw parties. You alienated our partners. And you acted like the crown was already on your head. Derek's sneer faltered. Dad, what are you talking about? Tomorrow is the announcement. I'm taking over. You are not taking over anything, Arthur answered coldly. I did not build Sterling Tech for 40 years just to watch an arrogant, entitled boy burn it to the ground in 4. I sold my controlling shares this morning. Derek froze. The blood drained from his face. You sold the company to who? To the only person capable of running it. Arthur said, to the woman sitting in front of you. Clara looked at Derek, her expression unreadable. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply let the truth hang in the air. Derek stared at the small black phone on the table, as if it were a bomb about to detonate. You sold the company to her A consultant. Clara is not just a consultant. Arthur's voice crackled through the speaker. She was the founder of the logistics network that kept us afloat 5 years ago. I spent the last 3 months watching her manage our accounts, repair the relationships you ruined, and treat our staff with actual respect. She bought my controlling shares with her own capital. As of noon today, Clara Hayes is the majority owner and the new CEO of Sterling Tech. Derek stumbled backward, bumping into an empty champagne cart. No, that's my birthright. You can't just give it away to a stranger because she wears cheap shoes and acts polite. It wasn't given. Derek, it was earned, Arthur corrected sharply. Something you know nothing about. I'm cutting your allowance, and you are no longer an executive at Sterling Tech. I suggest you apologize to Ms. Hayes. Goodbye, Derek. The line clicked and went dead. Derek stood perfectly still. The realization was crashing over him in waves. The lavish lifestyle, the unlimited cards, the respect he thought he commanded, it was all gone. And the person who held the keys to his entire future was the woman he had just spent the last 20 minutes humiliating. Clara quietly picked up her phone and slid it back into her tote bag. She looked at Marcus, the manager, who was standing quietly with his hands folded behind his back. Marcus, Clara asked, has the catering team prepared the food for Mr. Sterling's guests? Yes, Miss Hayes. It is waiting in the kitchens, Marcus confirmed. Derek looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. Maybe she would let the party proceed. Maybe she would take pity on him in front of his friends. Good, Clara said. Please have it boxed up and donated to the local shelter downtown. Ensure the delivery fee is charged to my personal account. You can't do that, Derek shouted, his voice cracking. My guests are arriving. I have investors coming. You're going to make me look like a fool. Clara stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of her beige trousers. For the first time since Derek had walked up to her table, she stepped toward him. She wasn't tall, but at that moment, she seemed to take up all the air in the room. You made yourself look like a fool, Derek, Clara stated. You judged a book by its cover, and you assumed your last name gave you the right to treat people like dirt. Your guests will be notified at the lobby that the event is canceled. Derek's hands curled into fists. He looked around wildly, hoping his friends would step in to back him up, but the pavilion was empty. His friends had slipped into the elevator the moment Arthur Sterling said the word cut off. He was completely alone. I won't forget this, Derek warned, though his voice lacked any real power. I don't want you to forget it, Clara answered calmly. I want you to remember it every time you walk into a room and assume you are the most important person there. She turned to the security guard, who was still standing by the entrance. Please escort Mr. Sterling to the lobby. Make sure he has his personal belongings. He will not be returning to this floor. The guard nodded respectfully. Yes, Ms. Hayes. He walked over to Derek and gestured toward the elevator. Sir, it's time to go. Derek looked at the guard, then at the manager, and finally at Clara. She had already sat back down in her chair, opened her tablet, and picked up her stylus. She had dismissed him completely, with no money, no title, and no audience. Derek had no choice. He turned in silence and walked toward the elevator. The heavy glass doors of the elevator slid shut, sealing Derek inside and taking him down to the ground floor. The pavilion was suddenly very quiet, save for the sound of the ocean waves crashing against the rocks below. Marcus let out a long breath and wiped his forehead again. Ms. Hayes, I must apologize. If I had known who you were, Clara held up a hand, stopping him gently. You don't need to apologize. Marcus, you handled a difficult situation with professionalism. You followed protocol, And you didn't let a guest bully you into breaking the rules. I appreciate that. Marcus smiled, his shoulders dropping in relief. Thank you, ma'am. Shall I have the staff clear away the decorations? Yes, please. Clara nodded. I prefer the space empty. And could you bring me a fresh glass of iced water? This one has gotten a bit warm. Right away, Ms. Hayes. As Marcus and the security guard retreated to the service quarters, Clara was left alone on the rooftop. She looked out at the vast, blue expanse of the ocean. The air felt cleaner now. She opened the succession document again. It hadn't been an easy journey. For 10 years, she had been underestimated. People saw a quiet woman who didn't flaunt her wealth, and they assumed she was weak. They assumed they could walk over her, but Clara had never fought with loud words or flashy displays. She fought with contracts, with hard work, with undeniable results. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Arthur. Did he leave? Clara picked up the phone and typed back, yes. The transition is secure. Enjoy your retirement. Arthur. She set the phone down and smiled softly. The company was hers now. By the time the sun began to set, the pavilion had been cleared of the extravagant floral arrangements and the excessive champagne towers. It was just a clean, elegant space with a beautiful view. Down in the lobby, things were less peaceful. Through the resort's internal updates, Claire received a brief note from Marcus stating that Derek's guests had arrived, only to be turned away politely by the front desk. Derek had been seen arguing with a valet outside before finally leaving in a rideshare, his corporate driver having been reassigned back to headquarters. There was no grand celebration for Clara. She didn't need one. She didn't need the validation of a crowd to know her worth. She reviewed the final pages of the quarterly report, making her notes in the margins. Tomorrow, she would walk into the Sterling Tech boardroom. She would still wear her comfortable loafers and her simple blouses. There would be executives who would look at her and whisper, just as Derek had done. They would wonder how she got there, and some might even try to test her authority. But Clara wasn't worried. She had the documents. She had the shares. She had the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who had built her fortress brick by brick. She took a sip of her fresh water, watching the sky turn a brilliant shade of orange and purple. The era of arrogance at Sterling Tech was over. The loud, empty noise had been escorted out of the building. It was time to get to work.